Good morning, everyone. My name is Rini Ledgerwood, and welcome to the Women's Coffee Club. We created this club to provide a safe space for women to share and inspire each other. So grateful to see all of you here, and especially our special guest, Barbara Mannino. And Barbara, good morning. And she will be presenting Story Changes. What is your title again?
Story changes everything.
Story changes everything, indeed, indeed. So, with that, Barbara, if you don't mind, tell us a little bit about your background and then go ahead with your presentation. There'll be plenty of time for Q&A at the very end. So go ahead, Barbara. Thank you again.
That's great. Thank you. So before I actually tell you about my background, I'm going to start with this comment that when you have an idea, if you keep it inside of you, if you never express it, it's powerless. You don't get seen and heard, and no one on the outside has the opportunity to think about it, reflect on it, turn it around, respond to it. And that's a very sad thing. And it's also a very ironic thing because in today's digital world, with social media being so prominent, getting seen and heard, especially if you're in business, but also if you're just an individual trying to create and define and be identified by your personal brand. It's ironic that we're encouraged to do that. And I believe that the mere fact that we're encouraged makes us afraid to do it, makes us worry, will we be judged? Maybe we'll procrastinate. We'll use procrastinate. We'll say we're too busy. But maybe it is just downright fear because somebody didn't laugh at something you said or look at you the right way or gave you a look that said, who does she think she is? So with that kind of tug of war, we oftentimes are relegated to keeping things inside of us. And that's really sad. And in the words of the great Maya Angelou, and I want to read this, there is no greater agony than bearing an untold story inside of you. So that's a good place to start my story because I've been really all about story since I was a little kid and carried around a notebook and crayons and pencils no matter where I went. Or as I get older, when we would go to events with our friends, we would go to concerts and they would say, well, there's Babs with her notebook. Because I was always looking around me and wanting to know everybody's story. Good thing, as I got old enough to follow that bent when I was in school, I became editor of my middle school newspaper, editor of my high school newspaper, did PR for my career office in college. And when I came out and had a brief but very unsuccessful stint in banking, which I think I was attracted to for the money and the men, I finally settled down to a life of journalism and followed my true love, stringing, as they called it, for a weekly newspaper. And I did that when my kids were growing up and we were surrounded by Fisher Price little people on deadline day. But when they were old enough for me to kind of return to the world outside to work, my journalism experience with the weekly newspaper was the hook that got me into corporate life, where I revamped a corporate newsletter. And that became the stepping stone to my next career as a reporter and editor for a global financial trade. And that became the stepping stone to me writing for Fox Business News, totally apolitical, all about business. And those jobs also concurrently became the opportunity for me to work in Fortune 500 companies in senior editorial positions, doing magazines, newsletters, all of the stuff that involved content that would promote the organization externally and build the culture internally. So the moral of that story is the thread that has always run through my work is story. I've been writing them forever. But the interesting thing was when I went solo, when I left corporate life and started to work as an independent contractor, I must admit that I was a little intimidated because all those shiny objects that popped into my email told me the stories of all these brilliant people who had MBAs from Harvard, and I just had my Bachelor of Arts in English. But at some point, I took a deep breath and I said to myself, wow, Barbara, pause for a second. You've got a great tool in your toolbox. You've got life because, wow, you've got so many stories in your life. And when you really think about it, those life stories are relatable to situations in business. And there's a good pairing. In fact, there's a very fine line, if there is one at all, between life and business. So once I became savvy and realized I had some stuff to get me going as a content marketer, I also realized that suddenly story had become a big thing. As a matter of fact, the word has almost been commoditized. Everybody is talking about story in business these days. So instead of just writing stories, which kind of was a talent that came naturally to me, I decided to study story and find out what all this talk about story was all about. It was a wonderful study, and I still study and read everything I can get on story because it's fascinating. For one thing, story has neuroscientific powers. When you hear a story, it impacts the dopamine and oxytocin in our brain and makes us more receptive to the information. So if you think about that in business, you'll get far more mileage promoting your business by telling stories than you will if you spew out a lot of data or you simply tell stories that heighten your credibility and validity. I've been in business for 20 years. We did this, we achieved that. People don't want to listen to that so much. But if you can wrap that into a story, people lean in and they remember you. And when it comes to brand, and again, whether it's your business brand or whether it's your personal brand, what you want is for people to remember you. You want them to talk about you nicely. You want them to smile when they hear your name. So to me, that's what story is all about. And the more I've studied it, and the more I have done it for my clients and myself, the more I not only love story, I am like a total believer in it. And here's the thing, story connects you with others. And this is really, I think, one of the coolest points, and people don't always talk about this. I believe that story empowers you because the more you tell your story, the more you kind of sit back and think, well, wow, why was I keeping this inside of me in the first place? I've done some cool things. I've reacted to things in a very resilient way. I've been vulnerable, but I've grown. And so on and on it goes. And the more you tell your story, the more delighted you become in it. And the more you believe in yourself. And actually, you attract people like a magnet. Goes without saying that attracting people like a magnet in business is fantabulous. And just think about being out in the world, going for a job interview, being a woman who leaves corporate life and has to make her way on her own. Just think about that. Being able to not only share your story, but to be delighted in your story, attracting people like a magnet, it doesn't get any better than that. And that's a very good place for me to inject a philosophy of life that I have. Because when you believe in yourself, when you're delighted in your story, that promotes your being comfortable in your own skin. And when you're comfortable in your own skin, fabulous just is. So get comfortable and be fabulous. Do you know, along that line, my mother is one of my great inspirations. And this was one of the references that Lachelle made a few minutes ago. My mother was really an incredible woman. And she was widowed very suddenly when my dad died unexpectedly from a heart attack at 58. So she was left on her own at 53. I had just gotten married. She was alone in the house. She had a ton of friends. She was active in the community. But 2 years after my dad died, she decided that she needed something more, that all her friends were married and she loved them and they were good to her, but she needed something where she could have an identity as Peg. That was her name, shortened from Margaret. So she went out and she got a job as a receptionist at a very prestigious country club in our area. And when she left that job, she was running the whole front office. And it's notable to say that when she retired, she was 83 years old. So my mother was an example of life throwing you a curveball. She even had breast cancer at 72, but her opening line when she woke up from surgery was, "Do I still have cleavage?" So she knew what it meant to have curveballs, but she also knew that even if she went and had a little bit of grieving, and I heard her crying about things sometimes, couldn't grieve for too long. You had to pick yourself up and literally dust yourself off. She would pick up the phone and call a friend. When she had her mastectomy, she went back to work after 4 weeks instead of the required 6. So she felt like she was open to vulnerability. She was definitely resilient and blazed many trails. And that's the story that Lachelle likes about my mother and her purple coat. Because my mother understood that simple things could make you comfortable in your own skin. So that fabulous just is. In the year or so before she died, she had this gorgeous purple coat. It was mohair and deep purple. And you know, purple is the color of royalty, but it is also the color of uniqueness and fearlessness and being bold enough to be your true self. My mother wore that purple coat the winter before she died, and she wasn't feeling well then. But when she wore it, there she was. She had beautiful white hair. She never colored it. A touch of makeup, a small high heel, and a beautiful outfit. And when she wore that purple coat, fabulous just was. Do you know she died in 2001? People still remember her. I remember Peg. And then there'll be a pause and they'll say, I remember how she looked in that beautiful purple coat. It was kind of the epitome of her believing in herself. She had not only found her fabulous, but she had found her purple. So I believe that story gets you to that place of fabulous and finding your purple. Why? Because stories are human. They're relatable. They take people to a satisfying outcome, and there's an emotion attached to that outcome. Stories show, don't tell. That's so important because instead of finger pointing and trying to prove a lesson, you share a story and you are showing people what you are trying to prove and say, the lesson you're trying to teach or the aha you're trying to create. And again, when you tell that story, tell it enough times, your delivery is one of energy. And you tell it with an energy that's all yours, and that infuses everything you write, say, and do. And once again, it's the delight of being yourself and magnetizing your personal or your business brand. So storytelling, as I said, is out there in the stratosphere these days. Truthfully, if you look at storytelling, it's a process. And I won't lie to you, it's not necessarily intuitive. It's not necessarily easy. And it just doesn't happen like that. It takes some time to cultivate the art of storytelling. That's why in business, people like me who are content writers and copywriters, we try to prove the point to others. You really can't go it alone. You need the wisdom of somebody who has an expertise in this area to guide you. But here are some tips, and this is kind of dissecting story, which to me makes it come to life. I believe that there are three powerful pillars to storytelling, and they are curiosity, clarity, and captivation. Now, I grant you that clarity is in the middle, and that pertains to the actual creation of your narrative. But I want to talk about that one first because I think that one is more understandable. When you create a story, yes, you have to have what we all learned in school, the beginning, the middle, and the end. But there's more to it than that. You have to reverse engineer. So you have to sit back and say, what do I want people to have as the takeaway of that story? And once you identify that, you then create a narrative which includes only those elements which effectively lead you to the end point. You leave out a lot of the unnecessary stuff. You're not telling a saga like, and then this happened, and then this happened, and then this happened. You really are putting out salient, relevant points that once again, as the story moves along, makes people lean in, can't wait to get to the next sentence, and want more. Clarity is essential to any story you tell, because without clarity, you become confused. And there's some saying going around that says, when you're confused, you lose. And certainly as a business person and entrepreneur, you don't want people on the outside listening to your brand story or your brand message and not understanding what that's all about. So clarity is key. And I mentioned brand story. That is an essential element to any narrative. Under that is your message, your brand message, and that's essentially a shortened version of your brand story. Why? Because it's created with a story arc or story construct. It starts with a problem or pain point, an aspiration, or something, a hope, or a dream. It shows that you are the key to helping them through that problem or pain, helping them get to their aspiration and their hopes and dreams. And then it gives a glimpse of what life will look like if they take what you are offering in business or even in life, just as a person who's sharing an idea that might shed some light on a problem they have. So there you have clarity in the middle, surrounded by the bookends of curiosity and captivation. Curiosity, I find, is the interesting thing. And that's oftentimes, I find, when I talk to people, is one of the hardest points, because they'll say, I don't have any stories to share. I don't know. Well, I want you to try this on for size, but I believe that stories are all around us. They happen to us every day. You can find a good story on the way to the dry cleaner or the drugstore. Maybe you ran into somebody you hadn't seen for 5 years. Maybe you smelled a scent in the air that reminded you of your childhood. Maybe it was an exquisite sunny day and the sky was so blue you could almost touch it. You could create a story about that, because you could create a story about how that environment made you feel. And I guarantee, if you tell the story about that blue sky and the contrast of the green trees against it and the thick white clouds, that you will evoke in your listeners same kind of wondrous feeling of a day like that, that fills you with energy, that fills you with happiness, that fills you with gratitude. And there you have created a connection. And in telling that story with energy, you have probably buoyed yourself. There is one of my favorite quotes from the author Elizabeth Gilbert speaks about the importance of curiosity. And she says, curiosity just asks you to turn your head 1/4 of an inch and look at something a little more carefully. I think it's just wonderful. That means that as you're out in the world, you kind of have to tweak your awareness and have some radar and always be open to the possibility of a story that you can create, or of talking to someone else and listening to their story and being invigorated by that, and being able to pass that story on so others can hear it as well. The last thing is captivation, and that goes back to that magnetizing your brand aspect. You can't just tell a story on a flat run. Again, you can't just say, so I woke up yesterday morning, the weather was a little warm and I heard the birds and there was a sign of spring. And I said, wow, well, spring is almost here and I'm happy. But if you deepen that and say, wow, I got up this morning and I noticed the sky was blue and I said, Barbara, you got to go out and take a walk. And I did. And I heard the birds chirping and I even saw a daffodil. And I realized that spring was around the corner and I felt buoyant. It's a small tale, but nonetheless, when you tell with energy and captivation, you yourself will get buoyed. But the people who are listening will feel that energy and they will embrace that energy too. So I think that stories, instead of being intimidated to tell them, or instead of being afraid to project your ideas out into the world, have the amazing power to be a life raft. Why? Because they're natural. They're a part of your life. And as I keep repeating, They are everywhere. Truly, I believe that when you look at life through the lens of story, it ups your sense of appreciation, it ups your sense of gratitude. And much like Rocky Balboa in the first movie of Rocky, when he runs up those steps in Philadelphia, it makes you raise your arm in the air and feel power and victory in a very positive way. And wow, I see Olmeka doing that. And that's a very good way to live life. Another author who says something I like, and I want to leave you with this thought, Nancy Duarte. She writes a lot about story and how it impacts life. And she says, the future isn't a place you're going to, it's a place you create. Isn't that lovely? Because it gives you such agency in the world. So I invite you all to go out today, and many of you are just starting your days, and find your purple. Do the Rocky cheer and find a story and share it with energy and live your life one story at a time.
Thank you, Barbara. Yay. Yeah, absolutely. Story connect people, so I think at this point, we want to open it up for a Q&A. I would start with Tamara. Tamara, tell us about your story and why what takes you here? What makes you want to be a coach? What is your story?
Well, as growing up, I'm going to try and use all these tools I just learned here. So growing up, I was, by the time I was 12, I was sexually, mentally, and physically abused. And when I became a teenager, I kind of became rebellious. And as an adult, I took a lot of those things that I learned as an adult or as a child into my marriage. And it became just kind of a roller coaster in my marriage. So now I've learned a lot of tools to turn my marriage around, and our relationship is happier and more great. Like I'm still working on the story. So we went from I was walking out the door 5 years ago, and I get to my car and I hear this voice, and I'm yelling at God, and I'm like, Lord, I've done everything. I've done this and this and this, and I'm like, I'm done. I'm leaving. I put my hand on the car door, and I hear this voice that says, you haven't done everything. And I said, oh, okay. And then I was like, and I just knew that there was something I hadn't done yet. So I grab my suitcase and I start walking back in the car or into the house, and I'm grumbling. Well, then I'm only giving it this much time, you know. And by the time I got back in the house, the Lord told me, you know, it's going to be a little bit rough for the first little bit, but you're going to do fine. So the next 2 weeks, I just did what the Lord told me to do. And about that 2-week mark, my husband and I were getting along. We were having a great time. And we even went to Hawaii and started walking on the beach together, holding hands like we were teenagers again.
Wow. Thank you so much. That was great. What a great story to take you
That's a
where you,
wonderful story of growth.
isn't that though? Isn't
Yeah.
that though?
Can I just
Yeah.
say one thing?
Yeah. Yeah.
When you said that line, I've done enough, and you were walking out the door, your whole level of emotion picked up. Start your story there. Then weave in the background elements about your childhood.
Okay.
Wow, that's great, Barbara. That's a great advice. So
Yeah,
take the part where people can relate, the pain point. That's how you start your story. Joey, what is your story?
Thank you.
and if I could just add,
Yeah, one more time.
it's a compelling first line. So people want to lean in. They want to know what's gonna happen next. And that first line, a compelling first line, is really important to whether people actually do continue to listen. It's a great story.
Thank you. Thank you.
Wow.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
That's a
Joey, I'm
great
so
advice,
sorry.
Barbara. No, no, no. This is a good practice for all of us because we're in this coaching business or whatever we're trying to share about our business. So we start with that pain point, the part where people could relate. Let's go to Joey. What's your story, Joey? What takes you here?
Story. All right. I have a lot of stories.
Oh,
Okay.
and you should, because there's tons of stories that support your brand. Your
She's an
brand's at the
amazing lady.
center.
Yeah. Yeah, Joey
All right,
has amazing story.
probably I'll just share our journey from zero to multi-millionario. Well, we're Filipino, so it's multi-millionario. It's well, I know that there is wisdom in poverty. The thing was, we had nothing, and then we had financial knowledge, and that's where our story really started. Homeschooling started, our investment started. It's all because we had nothing in the first place. So if you have nothing, you'd be more resourceful and you'd be wiser in all your decisions. And that's why we did homeschooling, really knows that. And and that's why we opted to work from home so that we'd have time with our children growing up. And now that they're teenagers, now we see that everything that we have done in the past, everything that we have decided, it might have, it might have some relation to our having nothing in the first place. But then it was because of that we were able to do all sorts of things, experiment on our lives, experiment on our kids, giving them chores, teaching them life skills instead of academics, and teaching them self-development. Now we see that now that they're teenagers, we see that we have made or built a perfect family, like really perfect, because it's based on our standards, not other people's standards. And so yeah, I mean, we're reaping the results now, the benefits of what we have done, and it's all because we we started from nothing. I think it was that, having nothing, being humbled by the fact that you really had nothing in the first place, and it was only God that gave you everything, all your talents, everything that happened in your life. Knowing that, you get to that place where, okay, God, everything came from you, and I'm gonna use these talents, whatever you have given, to the best of my ability, and here we are now.
First of all, I love your kitty. What's your kitty's name?
This is Fuzzy. She's so
Fuzzy?
sweet. Yeah, Fuzzy.
Uh, and second, of all, what is your business? You are a coach or you have
No,
another business?
I'm a manager at Sun Life of Canada, so financial
Ah, right.
insurance
When
with
I was in financial journalism, I used to cover Sun Life and interviewed
yes.
the then CEO. I loved that company. Such good people. And I was going to say to you that that beginning of going from nothing to something, going from nothing to, I think you said millionaire, if I heard it correctly, there's your opening line, kind of like, imagine going from nothing to millions of dollars and a family that blazed its own trail, my words, and a family that we can be proud of. So you lay that foundation. That's actually aspirational, and it shows this contrast. And when you say it with zest, once again, people will lean in because they'll want to know how you did it. And that line about modeling your family in your own values and standards as opposed to externals, such an important point. Really just such an important point. Authenticity is so valued these days, but that you're showing people that you've been able to create that. And you might even use an example about instilling your values in your kids as opposed to external values. So that's some inside stuff on the story.
Oh, can I just add the reason why I always say that it's based on our standards, because when you claim that you have a perfect family, people judge you because it's perfect. I mean, they always say nothing is perfect, no one is perfect, but we are perfect because it's based on our own standards and it's not based on your standards or society standards. So it's always perfect because it's ours. So I always have it in quotation, perfect. I always say that because for me it's really, it should be that, right? That should be, our life should be perfect because we're not basing it on some, rules that was set by the society. So it should be perfect for us.
And I think actually that's also another potential angle or opener for your story, because you're right. I mean, there's a lot of talk about perfection. What is it? Is it worth it? Nobody's ever perfect. But what if you opened with, my husband and I have a perfect family? I know you're questioning them, but let me tell you why. And you could get into that whole thing because it was your standards. Talk about teaching lessons, showing lessons. That's such an important one for people to hear. So that's, again, another angle for your story.
Thank
Wow,
you.
that's great. Yes, yes, absolutely. That's good. So get to a point where the part where people could relate to your story. Carol, you're next. What is your story? What takes you where you are today? She's in Toastmasters, so she has stories. Heard her story.
Well, one of the stories that I tell is that my mother left me with a very mysterious message just before she passed. And to go back, to roll back, she was a very unique individual who just did what she wanted, no matter what anybody else said. So she and just quite a really just a person who was very talkative. She was just really a character. She was quite a character. And I'm from Hawaii, so my mom was in Hawaii. At some point, I left Hawaii. I went to New York to become a dress designer. To go to school and become a dress designer. And I knew that my mom was up to all kinds of adventures back home. So really helping people, that's what she loved to do. She loved to help people. She was a matchmaker, not by trade. She just loved putting people together. She would even, she wanted to bring my cousin over from the Philippines, my female cousin, desperately wanted to bring my female cousin over from the Philippines. So she actually targeted a young man that she met at the airport and said, "Do you like Filipino women?" And
That's so great.
yeah, it's great. That's an example of what she would do. And so he said yes. She said, "Well, okay, if you'll go over to the Philippines, I'll pay for your trip." So he did. They met, they fell in love, Stephen and Vina, and they're still married. It's over 45 years. They're married longer than I am. I'm married 41 years. But that's the type of thing. She just got into people's business, So anyway, she
I love that line. I'm sorry to interrupt, but
she
she
got
got
into
into
every
people's business.
she got into
I
people.
love that story. That's fabulous.
Anyway, so when I was in New York, I was at my job, and she called me and she said, Carol, well, before that, she had been suffering with cancer for about 3 years. Then one day she called me, she said, Carol, the doctor said I have a month to live. And I said, what? What? Um, and um, and she said, Carol, are there any colleges? Maybe I'll come and stay with you for a while in New York. I said, sure, Mom. And she said, are there any colleges there? Because I said, yes. She said, well, yeah, because I want to take a course there. And I said, yes. And she said, are there any Filipino restaurants there where you live? I said, no. She said, good, because I want to open up a Filipino restaurant. I said, Mom, what about what the doctor said? She said, Carol, the doctor is wrong. Well, he was wrong about 1 month. She lasted 3 months. And I was just really, really confused about this conversation that we had. Then one day, it was maybe over a decade later, a long time later, I was driving around in San Diego, and I see this metal box on the side of the road on Mira Mesa Boulevard. And it says, very colorful, with very colorful images, it says, live as if you're going to die tomorrow. And I said, wow. I drove next to that box. I looked on the other side and it said, dream as if you live forever. So I said, oh, that's what my mom was trying to say. She didn't believe in saying it. She just, was actually giving me a real example. She didn't want to talk about death. She didn't want to talk about any of those. She just wanted to give me an example of live as if you'll die tomorrow, dream as if you'll live forever. So I remember that, and that's how I, live my day to day. I'm like, Mom said, dream as if you'll live forever. So I am going to be 69 soon, and I'm working and going about my business as
Can't
if
tell
I'm
that.
live forever and dream as if I'm going to live forever. Right.
Well, I
Thank you.
think I would have loved your mother. I love mother stories, and they're such powerful role models for many of us daughters. What a powerful woman she was.
Yes, 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 yes.
And that's dream as if you're going to live forever, I find to be a very compelling line, because you often hear the other one.
Yes, right.
Right? But
Yes.
the dream as if you're going to live forever, that's
Right.
powerful. That's a potential starting line. And there's some really cool connection, which might be a good beginning also, that when you're driving along the boulevard and you see this box and there was a pull for you to
Right.
the box 20 years after your mother died.
Mhm,
But it was
mhm.
as if she had left you the message. There's something
Yes.
to explore there as part of the anchor of that
Yes. Well,
story.
I call it a spiritual download.
Yeah, I love that expression too. I think it
That's
is the spiritual. If you believe in such things as the universe at work, she was very busy that day. You saw the box, right? I mean,
Yeah.
it's beautiful.
that's
And I
amazing.
believe those things happen for a reason.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's
Absolutely.
great.
Because it is my guiding principle now. I mean, people, my best friend said, oh, Carol, I give you a lot of credit for starting a business at your age. And, that thought never even entered my mind.
God bless.
Didn't even enter.
Did I hear you say you were 69?
I'm going to be in
Yeah.
August. Yes.
Life begins at 70, Carol.
I love it. I love it. Thank you so much for this story, Carol and
Thank you.
Barbara.
My pleasure.
Suzanne, you're next. What is your story? What takes you here?
Oh gosh. All right. So my story is I lived 50 years as a traumatized, victimized woman squished between two brothers. And in 1 year, my whole life turns around 180 degrees. And that has been the best part of my life. Grew up between two brothers who were high achievers, and my mother and father's attention was on them. So I was invisible. But when I went through, and I was a people pleaser, trying to please mom, to get her attention. And at my 50th year, I get fired as a school substitute. My whole teaching career was over. That led into a stressful car accident where I nearly lost my life. 3 days later, I meet Mary Morrissey. She turns my whole life around. And I find out that I'm autistic in that year too, to find out I have a whole new way of looking at life. And now I can take my experiences as a late diagnosed autistic woman and a traumatized woman and lead other women into a fulfilling life.
That's a beautiful story. And I know someone who is also on the spectrum, and he, since the pandemic, when he began to have the opportunity, there you are, when he began to have the opportunity to, you know, not perform, but show up on video, he has built such a following, and his story is so beautiful. I love stories like that because those are wins that have such incredible impact. And I loved when you said you were a 50-year-old a victimized 50-year-old woman squished between two high achieving brothers, and life events happened and you turned yourself around. That also would be kind of I love the way you started, victimized and squished. That was such a visual image. And then and then you build on that, how your parents paid attention to them and you always probably felt second shrift. And I think there's a cool twist to have found out about the autism and yet to feel 10 feet tall, almost as a result of that also, which is another possible first line.
I teach women how to be self-empowered, no matter what their circumstances, conditions, or situation is. I teach women how to be self-empowered, to go on and live the life they're meant to live.
It's a beautiful story. Yes. Just as a PS, do you know Mary Morrissey personally? Because she seems like such a wonderful woman.
I do. If I may share.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
I went to one of her retreats. I went to one of her retreats after my very first, what they called time machine, came out in Dearborn, Michigan, and my life just took off from there. Absolutely took off. I got on the stage for the first time, told my story there. And yeah, the bamboo started growing 50 feet tall that year.
That's quite lovely. I mean, you've thrown out so many things that you could pull into that story, starter, middle, ending. And isn't it interesting too, how an adverse situation created such opportunity and personal growth for you, which is another one of my beliefs. And, your opener could be, you can win from adversity. I'll tell you why, and go into it.
I use the statement, I've done a couple of talk shows and such, and rising above the conditions, circumstances, and situations of an autism diagnosis.
Wow.
Love it. Powerful. It's a beautiful story.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I just want to say that we're probably going to go over 8 o'clock because it's getting close. If you need to leave, feel free to do so. But we're going to give everyone a chance to tell your story. So Jane, We want to hear from you. What's your story? What takes you here? Why are you in astrology?
It's great to
Jean.
be here, Barbara. You're inspiring everyone. I'm loving this. Well, everybody's heard of the woman in the moon, haven't you? No, of course you
No.
haven't. You always heard of the man in the moon. Well, I'm the woman in the moon astrology.
Yay.
I have been studying astrology since I was 13 years old. I'm a few years removed from that. And the reason why I continue to study astrology is that I found out that based on your date, your time, and your place of birth, a thing called a birth chart tells the story of you. It's about the themes that you're meant to attract in your life, the cycles that you are a part of. And it brings a meaning, and I continuously see the validation that people get because I celebrate people. It's not about bad, scary news. It's about, do you know how brilliant you are? Are you shining as bright as I see that you are? Can I show you on this piece of paper, this 8.5 by 11 sheet that I sent you with this gorgeous birth chart? Oh, thank you, Suzanne. And I have some tremendous stories, and I love the people that I've met. I've clients in many countries. Probably 80% of them are in the U.S., but it's diversity. It's bringing people together. It's showing that the holes in your head fit the bumps in your head. And probably some of my best stories come from when I'm sitting with couples and I'm doing a chart comparison of the two. And at the end of the hour and 15 minutes that I spend with them, they look at each other. Almost every couple will look at each other when we're done and say, "You can't help yourself, can you?" You really have to be you. You are you. You're meant to be you. Um, and there's an acceptance that otherwise, in a world that we don't do enough of accepting of one another. So one of my funniest stories very quickly is my son, when he was approaching my oldest son, Anthony, approaching his 30th birthday. He had a serious girlfriend when he was about 25, 26, but he was becoming a workaholic. And I'm threatening to put him on Match.com and, send his picture in and do his bio and so on. I said, I know you want a family. I know, but you're like, all you do is work. Oh, mom, well, he was the kind of kid, even as a teenager, he would call me with the women that he was dating, their birth information, and I would give him the lowdown. So he says to me, Mom, I'll tell you this. I'm 7 months away from my 30th birthday. If I'm not close to really dating someone that I'm interested in, it is time for me to go on a dating site or be the next bachelor on ABC. But so what he did was he calls me about 2-3 months later and he says, "Hey, I met someone last night. Here's her information." And so I remember I was sitting in this chair and typing in the information. And I said, "Anthony, you met your wife last night." And he said, "What? You have never said that to me. Never. What?" And I said, "Yes, because you've never met her before." And well, that was 4 children ago and a 14-year marriage. And they're joined at the hip. So anyways, it's fun for me, but it's so rewarding and it touches my heart. And so that's my
Wow.
story.
Thank
Well,
you
that's a
for
great
that story.
story
Isn't
right
that amazing?
there.
Love it.
I
Love it.
love it too.
Yeah,
The son is a story in itself, and this is the girl you're going to marry would be a great opening line. That's what I said to my son. And 14 years down the road, that statement is true. Also, Woman in the Moon compared to Man in the Moon. Fabulous.
Wow.
Thank you.
I love
Yes.
Thank you,
that.
Barbara.
Thank you.
So-
Thank you, Barbara. I love it that you're picking up the catchy, the anchor story.
Yeah,
So
the things in it. And
yeah, I love it. Now I want to hear it from Omeka. You're next, Omeka, but thank you, both Jane and Barbara.
Oh goodness. I was like, no. So yeah, okay. That's something to notice. I'm scared of my story. And there's definitely not one story. So let me see. Life as a creative. Growing up, I loved music. I would get in trouble and be sent to my room, and I had tons of records, and it was okay for me to play my record player, and I would sing and dance, and I forgot all about being in trouble and being on punishment. As years went on, I decided to play the clarinet, and then I moved on to the saxophone, all the while playing sports and having a grand old time growing up. And as I left home, I grew up taking trips around the world with my mom and going back and forth to Africa. And so the rhythm and the soul of Black people and the soul of African people and our connection was always at the front of my mind and in my heart. And later on, I would learn that my family was from the South, and not everyone that's Black is, but there was a connection there. And I decided to start drumming. And to this day, I love drumming, and it is a passion and a power and a purpose that I've developed from my love of music early on, and drumming in all different types of venues and with all genres of music has been a joy and a love for me that will last the rest of my life.
you know what
Wow.
would be, first of all, I love the saxophone. And I'm very impressed with all the instruments you play. But you know what would be fun to talk about, for your starter, like being a kid, it's not necessarily a good thing to get a timeout and being sent to your room. But for me, it was heaven. Plenty of records. I turned them on. I listened to music, and I love that you sang and danced. I sing and dance around my house too. There's no greater joy. So I could see that as being the beginning of your story, and then you could pull in the whole thing about your mom and going to Africa and embracing that culture and the rhythms of that culture. It would
Yeah,
work
I was trying to
really
make
well.
it short and wrap it up, and because I could go on and on. So that was great, just in being afraid and then taking a piece of my life and making it into a story and kind of wrapping it up there. But thank you for that.
Yeah.
Okay. I
Great
have to
You know,
story.
we all have our
listen.
unique greatness. Whatever it is, we all have our unique
Yeah.
greatness. And I do believe that story makes us realize that and makes us share our gifts with the world.
Yep. Thank you, Omeka. Arlene, what's your story? Why you where you are today? This great coach teaching people how to become millionaire.
Thing. Good
You
thing.
are so wonderful. I received that. Yes. Great coach teaching people to become millionaires. Okay. Several years ago when I was starting my career journey, I started out as a director of career development. And then I was a director of workforce development. And then I was a manager, contract training manager for a healthcare system. And I was doing all these different things. And at one point, I got someone who said to me, oh, you're doing too many different things in your career. You have to do just one thing. Now, when I was in college, I was trying so hard to find that one thing, that true ikigai that was going to, catapult me into the next stratosphere. And I couldn't find it. And I remember a lady saying to me, she was my hairdresser actually, but she also knew my family. And she said to me, when people have difficulty finding their majors or their true calling, it's because they're supposed to do business. So, I thought very nice, and I just kept moving anyway. Like we all do, we hear great advice and you just keep going. So I went and I did a multiplicity of other things. Fast forward to COVID. I was sitting and I began thinking of all the people who were shut in their homes and had no one to talk to, no one to communicate with. And I said, although I've wanted to write a book for so many years and couldn't do it, I have time now. I have absolutely no excuse. And I began to put pen to paper. And I came up with the 10 secrets that truly helped me in my life to move forward, to overcome fear, to get unstuck from all the challenges that I had encountered. I wrote the book, became a bestseller on Amazon. The secrets overcoming fear. 1, clarity, which is what you've been talking about so wonderfully, Barbara. Secret number 2, visualization, seeing yourself in the role that you truly want to be in. Momentum, moving forward, even though you don't know all the wherefores and the whyfores of your journey, begin moving. And 4, what we're all doing here today, proximity. Being in proximity with others who are endeavoring to do the things that you want. And then there are 6 other secrets. I started a business helping people to do just the things that I discuss in the book in order to truly self-actualize, overcome their fears, become wildly successful. Because once you're doing what you've truly been called to do, it's impossible not to soar and be successful. Thank
That
you.
Arlene.
I love that line. Once you're doing what you've truly been called to do, it's impossible not to soar. That's a beautiful line. And your story supports that. And you told it with such vigor and energy. You really brought a lot of personalization and humanization to it, and definitely made it so relatable. I very much enjoyed it. And that's another story about COVID opening up worlds for people. As bad as it was, so many opportunities came out of it. And you're an example of that.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Arlene. What a great story. I know it's already past 8 here, so we're just going to go on. We have 2 more, and then we wrap it up. Eva, what's your story, Eva? What takes you here?
I don't have an interesting story. I had an easy childhood, happy. I somehow swam through education, which I did not enjoy, and being bored to death at school and very often at the university, I swore to myself that if I ever see any student of mine being bored, I would immediately change my profession. The only thing I can say is I have been absolutely passionate about learning, about helping people learn, about helping people discover their strengths and overcome any challenges that they think they have, and very often they don't, but sometimes they do. And I love teenagers. I love working with teenagers. Maybe because they apparently are such challenge, and reaching a teenager and getting connection, even at my age now, absolutely, makes me fly. Makes me so happy that it is possible. I always thought that, when you're old, you can't do it. Strangely enough, it's still working for me. So yes, I don't think I have anything else particularly interesting to say, except that I dramatically had to change the way I function. You know, I had a 7-year break in my professional activity, and I came back to professional life. Thanks to Julie and Mark Santos, I had the privilege of starting to work online, which was, you can imagine what a change that was. I had some wonderful people in my master classes saying, "Oh, Eva, if you just click on something up there, you know, this is what you're going." You know, it was also dramatically new to me, going on functioning on Zoom, which I now enjoy very much. But it's all about learning and empowering people through helping them understand that they can learn, and learning is their natural way of living, and it is something that never finishes. My great-granddaughters walk into my room and says, "What are you doing, Bapti?" I said, "I'm learning." "Not again," they say, "not again." I say, "Yes, I am learning, all the time learning, and I hope to be doing this until I die." Well, thank you very much.
See, that's a great story, Eva.
That is a beautiful story. And I love the little scenario of your granddaughters walking in and what are you doing it again. I mean, that's such a great beginning. And to go into that you love working with teenagers, and you had a line in there where you said, "Yeah, I'm old and I didn't think it would work, but it does." And I actually think that we women who are older have such a gift, a privileged gift, that we can give to the people coming up behind us to show them that it doesn't end. And there's so much to learn. There's so much, you know, to turn you on and be excited about. And that's a wonderful lesson right there.
Yeah.
You said all those things so beautifully.
Well,
Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara.
For somebody
Thank
who
you.
didn't think they had a story.
Thank you. Yeah, we all seem to look into the things that are not necessarily positive about our lives, and yet we have so much to give. So inspiring.
No, but
Julie, yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, I just want to add that when I hear Susanna's story, you know, this is something that opens my heart, and that is something so incredibly wonderful, that when I look at my, you know, my life going kind of okay, it was not all easy, but still, compared to what Suzanne has done, I feel I haven't done very much at all.
Don't compare, Eva. Don't compare.
I
Your
know,
story is
but
great.
yes, but I just love the stories when people so dramatically change their lives, you know.
Yeah.
And I hope I can sometimes facilitate that in others. Well, anyway, thank you.
I imagine that you do. I love the way you use the word dramatically. You say it again with such energy. That in itself is inspiring. I have a feeling you make an impact.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Julie, you're the last one, and then we'll wrap this up.
I can verify that impact, because that's exactly what she did to me when I was in the UK. And you know, I grew up never wanting to be a teacher, and everywhere I went, I ended up being asked to be a teacher. You know, even I didn't even train, and I was still asked to be a teacher, and I became a potter, and then I did workshops and were teaching people. Had so much fun. So I realized that I had to have connection with people. And so Ava and I came together. Goodness knows when it was. I was living in the UK, and I just went into one of her workshops at a big conference. We had a wonderful association that was really looking at education. And so, you know, and I had a son that was ADD and fell through the rails badly. And I thought it was my mothership. And I got this passion for learning as well. And this passion for, you know, the schooling we went through and how on earth we survived. But we did. So, you know, that passion for teaching is still there, or inspiring, or, and so a bit of a similar story. And Ava is incredibly wonderful and an inspiration to me. So that, that was a wonderful combination that we had in the UK, where we didn't use it until I moved to Holland here, and then we started to do some more things together. So we're still planning to do that, and I think there's nothing nicer. And again, Suzanne, I just love what you're doing. And of course, I used to get into special. I didn't even want to be in sort of kind of special needs that we had. It was learning diversity, but I just plopped into it somehow, from coming, because it was a natural thing, because I struggled at school myself. So, I would be one of these, and the kids loved it because they'd never struck anybody quite like me. And I thought I was a bit too old to even be in the teacher's room at that stage. But, if they were dyslexic, and I just I would be rubbing my hands together. I thought, oh, yes, another one, great, and we would go about the discovery of learning. How do you learn? And, they would look at me. They didn't even want to come in, they were dragging me. Oh, no, such a stigma about coming for a bit of special needs help. They hated it. But within 2 or 3 weeks, I had them running in. They were running in the room. And a lot of that was made possible because of the work that I'd done with Ava, with the mind mapping and everything else, and understanding that wonderful diversity of how people learn. And the talents that are hidden. And once they're exposed, it's like opening the heart. It opens the heart of the child. And what it did with me is their discovery opened my heart, because I didn't even realize I had these things happening.
Thank you.
And you can see in others what they can't see in themselves so often,
Yes.
So yeah,
Thank
that's
you
my
so much,
You
Julie.
tend to talk and teach about things
Oh,
that
yes.
are on your mind, right? That
Yeah.
I didn't see what you're holding up. I'm sorry, Eva.
Oh, that's a book. I went to a book,
Yes.
what do you call it? Opening, or about a week
Firefly.
ago. Yeah, and the fireflies. And this woman has a ADHD bordering on
Beautiful.
whatever label we like to put on them. We love labels, don't we? And she wrote a book from a child's point of view. And it's called what is it? Something pie,
Firefly.
firefly, jelly pie, firefly. And she's written about the beauty of this child's ADHD and how she's so different and how she gets through. And it's so beautiful. I was in tears at the opening. It was a surprise visit. And I walked in, I just wanted to hug this woman because everything she said was beautiful. And what an inspiration to write a book like this so that children can read it, but adults too, you would love it. You would just love it. And it doesn't
It was
matter.
Thank you so
probably
much,
the
Julie. Yeah.
adults that really
Yeah.
need to learn that stuff. Your
Yes, and
enthusiasm
yeah,
about the
Ava, of course, has
diversity
written
in
books
the way
called The
people
Learning
learn stuff.
Adventure, which is supposed to be for children, but no, it's for adults as well. I use it as a
Well,
baby.
Yes.
good
Wonderful.
children's books are for adults, but you are absolutely right. The diversity about the way people learn. And when you talked about it opening your heart and them running into the classroom, I mean, again, what a beautiful story. And to be able to show
I
adults
can still
that
feel
they
that
have to open
gorgeousness,
themselves up. Yeah.
Thank
Because
you so much. Yeah.
Sorry,
Unfortunately,
we're late. We didn't
know we're
realize that
over.
the hour had gone forward. Dear, oh dear.
yes, this has been wonderful. We could go on and on with this, but thank you so much, Barbara. But we
And
we
I'm sorry
already
I missed
passed
you, Barbara.
20
Sorry.
minutes.
You know, I would be happy to put my email in the Facebook
Yes, the
place.
chat.
In
Yes.
case any of you, I have story starters. I have some things I've written on story. If you're ever interested in reading any of that stuff, I would be more than happy to share it. So I'll put my
Yes.
email in after we leave.
Please do. Please do. And thank you again, Barbara. This has been an amazing session here with everybody having a chance to share their stories. And next week, we're going to have Joey. Joey will be presenting next week. Joey, you want to share a little bit about what your topic is?
Well, the topic would be it's all about me, ME. It's all about mastering energy and managing emotions. Just like what I have taught you before, but there are new ones here, so they might want to hear them too.
Sounds good. We're looking forward to next week. In the meantime, have a great week, great weekend, everyone, and we'll come back. Thank you again, Barbara, and everyone for your participation and contribution, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you so
Bye-bye,
much.
all.
It was great. Bye.
Okay, bye.
Thank you, Barbara.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Barbara.
Bye. My pleasure.
Thanks,
I
everyone, for
love
listening.
talking to all
you.
of you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rainy.
Bye.
All right, peace, yeah.